Hello students, here's a video guide to help you with your compare and contrast essay. First of all, everything that you need is in the compare and contrast folder. You get there from content, and then you go to compare and contrast. And here's all the resources. Here's the essay prompt. And I added these. Here's a resource on how to embed evidence. Here's an outline. And here is how to create a works cited page. Because you are using two sources, you will need a works cited page. And so we need to watch this video, and I'll walk you through the process very easily. The essay prompt already had an outline in there for you. Remember, we talked about how there are two structures. There's a point-by-point structure and a subject-by-subject structure. Well, those outlines, I've added that right here and giving you a couple of examples that might help you. This is just the generic outline. This one is subject by subject. And so what you would do with a subject by subject, you would basically just have two body paragraphs. One paragraph is about your first source, and the second paragraph is about your second source. Both sources, you're comparing the same points. It's just you're doing it separately. And so this is probably the easier way to write the essay. If you want an example, look at the source in the folder called Neat versus Sloppy. They use a subject by subject structure, or she uses rather. Okay, I've done two examples for you. This one is if I were to write an essay comparing millennials to Generation X, I would have one paragraph about millennials, and I would talk about their work ethic, their political views, and their relationships. And then I would have another paragraph about Gen X, and I would talk about the same points. Work ethic, politics, relationships. Okay. I've also done this using speeches, speech after tragedy, post-tragedy speeches. I would compare George Bush's 9/11 speech to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Pearl Harbor speech, because those were similar tragedies. And so I've looked at both speeches, and I noticed that both presidents talk about, they provide us some background information with the attacks, and they acknowledge our fears and try to calm them. And so I would talk about that and how they both try to ease our fears. Both presidents also try to unite the nation, and both presidents offer a plan for justice. One says we're going to war, and another one says pretty much the same thing. But that's what I would talk about. Fears, unity, justice. If you are going to compare and contrast two children's books, one from like the 50s and one more modern, and then you would probably compare some elements of literature. So you could compare the characters, what kind of characters are in modern novels versus the types of characters that are in not novels but children's books from the 50s. You could compare illustrations because they're different. And illustrations would include the graphic, it would include colors, what kind of colors were used. You could also compare text. The books from the past, there's more text on a page than modern books. The language is more formal. Today it's more informal. So those are some elements that you can compare and contrast in if you compare children's books. Okay. Now the second outline structure is a point-by-point comparison. You would probably have 3 body paragraphs in this type of structure. It's a little bit more challenging, but it's also a little bit more elevated or sophisticated way to do it. So it's the same thing. You still are comparing 3 traits. It's just you're doing it side by side. Here's an example. I'm still talking about millennials, but my one body paragraph right here would be about the work ethic. And so the first half of the paragraph, I would talk about millennial work ethic, and the second half of the same paragraph, I would talk about Gen X. And then I would do that with their politics and their relationships. Same thing with the speeches. I would compare how both presidents are trying to ease fears of the nation. I would discuss what Roosevelt says, and then I would discuss what Bush says. Okay. Notice, since we're really comparing the same amount of information, the essay should be about the same length. This one, a subject by subject comparison, the body paragraphs would be longer. This one, since we have 3 body paragraphs, they would just be shorter. Okay, that's the one resource you might want to take a look at. The other resource that I put in here is how to create a works cited page, and that's a video. So just view the video. Once you finish the essay, it'll show you how to write your works cited page. The other source right here is how to embed evidence. Because you are using evidence, you have sources, you need to embed the information properly, the source properly. And this handout will tell you. This is very similar to what you are doing already with your reading responses. In your reading responses, you embed the evidence. You don't just plop down big bits of text. And so this is the exact same information, but you're going to use it for this source or this assignment. When you embed or sandwich text evidence, you need 4 parts. You need a transition, you need a lead-in, you need the cited and quoted text, and then you need a couple of sentences explaining what it means and why it matters. What does the source mean and why does it matter to your argument? And so here are some transitions that you can use because you are comparing and contrasting. I would kind of focus here on these. You could also use emphasis, or if you're adding information, use these transitions. Down here are verbs. These are the verbs that you would use when you're discussing a writer's purpose or his evidence. And then down here is an example. For this example, I just used George Bush's 9/11 address to the nation. Okay, so here's my quote right here. This is what he says in his speech. He says, "This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace." So I do not want to just plop that long sentence down in the middle of a paragraph. That's not really very good writing. I need to sandwich it or embed it. And here's how, with the 4 parts. Transition, lead-in, cited text, means and matters. And so here's what I've done. I wrote, for instance, which is my transition. At the very end of his speech, that's my lead-in, Bush describes this tragedy as a time, open quote, when all Americans from every walk of life unite, end quote, in order to find, open quote, justice and peace, end quote, Bush, period. Notice the period is after the parenthetical citation, not before. Notice that the quotation mark is after the text, not after the parenthetical citation. This is the proper format right here. Okay, so that's my transition, my lead-in, my cited text. Now I need to explain what it means and why it matters. So I have 2 sentences after. By doing this, Bush understands that during calamity, especially one as devastating as 9/11, it is human nature to search for support. When people face hardship, they reach out to others. So the president encourages unity as a first step to recovery. This is one chunk right here. So you would repeat this again for your second source. So I would maybe go up here. I'm going to compare because both presidents kind of have the same topics and same attitude and same goals. And so I would say, in the same manner, President Roosevelt argues that, quote, I would use his speech. Okay, that's how you do it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and good luck.